Now it's time for my 5 hardest bosses. Bear in mind, I have beaten the game and have experienced all 19 bosses to varying degrees of success. Same rules as before, so let's go. My number 5 is Beppy the Clown. At first, it seems like a mere challenge of just getting the timing correct. The first phase isn't too bad, but what messed this one up for me big time was the roller coaster. It always comes in at the most inopportune times and fucks up any chance you might have had of getting a clean shot. If you destroy his second phase, and the roller coaster comes for you in the third, there's no way around it. You are going to take a hit no matter where you're standing. In his last form, he turns into this giant swing ride and occasionally vomits these little penguins who throw baseballs at you. But because you're trying to navigate 3 things at once, while also trying to avoid the roller coaster, which has just tripled its speed, by the way, there's just far too much clutter on the screen, and you'll never do it without the right weapon combination and a lot of luck. My number 4 hardest boss is Rumor Honeybottoms. She herself does not attack you in the first form, but what makes this fight particularly difficult is the infrequent opportunities you have to parry anything. You can parry the spears that she summons in the second or third phase, but they don't count towards your final score. You need to parry the small cones that the worker bee fires at you in the first phase, and most of the time you're going to miss because you can't predict what pattern they're going to spread. Another hard thing about this fight is that half the time, I didn't know what weapon I should choose. It seemed that the roundabout was my best choice, but the lobber is a more effective weapon by far. Too bad it barely hits anything here, because you have to keep scrolling upward, and upward, and upward, and in some cases you can't keep going because you need to know where Rumor is going to pop in at any given moment. My number 3 boss is Jimmy the Great. First of all, this boss has the most forms out of all the bosses, 5 in total. First, you have to dodge objects. Next, you have to shoot his face and dodge spinning blades. Then, you have to fight a weird ghost-like face popping out of a mummy's tomb, and after that, you fight this Geppetto shop reject, and finally, you have to contend with what I call the Illuminati pyramids and his hypnotic-like eye beam, which are next to impossible to avoid. This fight requires far too much precise timing, but at the very least, the attacks can be somewhat predictable if you get the hang of them, and the first and fourth phase give you a few parry opportunities, but outside of that, Jimmy is a genie I'm hoping none of you ever get if you rub that lamp. My number 2 hardest boss is Dr. Call's Robot. I know what you're probably thinking. You just have to get good, to which I disrespectfully disagree. You do not know the meaning of anger, frustration, and rage quitting until you've encountered this iron giant understudy. What makes this boss so hard is surprisingly his first phase. You have to take out 3 sections of his body, but every time you take out a section, it's immediately replaced with an attack that's either faster, more unpredictable, or just plain annoying. His antenna shoots a laser at you, but if you destroy it, bolts fly at you. His chest emits this tiny pink object that creates a barrier that hurts you, and you need to parry it to get across, but if you take out his chest, then his arms come out to either fire projectiles at you or summon a magnet that pulls you to the bottom of the screen. His stomach or his pelvis, I really don't care what part of his body it is, fires these 4 small airplanes at you that have to be dodged, or you can simply take them out. But if you take out that section, homing bombs fly at you, and as if that's not bad enough, they have a huge blast radius that can hurt you if you're anywhere close to them. And seeing that this is a flying level, you're bound to get caught in a corner. Now imagine all 3 of those more powerful attacks going simultaneously. Sounds horrible, right? Well, guess what? That's exactly what happens after you take out all 3 sections. But the second phase isn't as bad. The final phase is the most difficult because you'll never know if you're hitting Dr. Call, and you're too busy avoiding projectiles and walls. It's far too much to ask of the player. Before we get to my number 1 pick for the hardest boss, some honorable mentions. Grim Matchstick. Just use the lobber in the charge shot. He's not as bad as most people make him out to be. The Devil. I expected more of a challenge from the Prince of Darkness. Wally Warbles. Don't forget to get the bombs, and he's a cakewalk. Baroness von Bonbon. The candy minions are what make this boss fight challenging, but at least they only add 1 layer at a time. And without any further hesitation, I can safely say my number one hardest and personally most hated boss in Cuphead is... Be warned, there is a lot of venom in my number one choice. The hardest boss in all of Cuphead, Cala Maria. First thing to say about this boss is that while she does have a cool design, she is merciless in all of her attacks. She has two fish, a red one and a yellow one, that fire projectiles at you that either need to be dodged, parried, or maneuvered around patiently. She has an arsenal of minions at her immediate disposal that just add too many layers to the first phase of this fight, and most of the time, it forces you to multitask before you get a chance to get used to her attacks. If you fire at her right away, you will build up a super card, but when she summons her fish from under the water, she'll duck down first, and sometimes if you fire at her, she'll dodge your attack completely. But after I got over the trauma that was her first phase, I encountered the part of her fight that turns you to stone and renders you immobile. More often than not, you're going to be caught in the wrong position at the wrong time, and you are going to be turned to stone while enemy fire is being thrown at you from her eels. Very rarely will you be able to parry their projectiles, but I died on her in this phase more times than I care to count. For as bad as Dr. Call's robot got, his phases were at least just hard because you had to multitask too much. This is throwing in another element that no other boss in the game can do, making for cheap deaths, aggravating results, and who I consider to be the hardest boss and my personal most hated. Never mind that her design is cute, this was the most flawed, annoying, unfair, unpredictable fight in the entire fucking game for me, and I can easily deem Cala Maria as my personal hardest boss in the game. The Devil. I expected more of a challenge from the Prince of Darkness. Wally Warbles. Don't forget to get the bombs, and he's a cakewalk. Baroness von Bonbon. The candy minions are what make this boss fight challenging, but at least they only add one layer at a time. And without any further hesitation, I can safely say my number one hardest and personally most hated boss in Cuphead is